The crystal chandelier cast sharp shadows across the marble floor as 18-year-old Bianca Monroe stood in the center of the grand ballroom, her designer fighting gear gleaming under the lights. Her perfectly manicured hands gripped her phone, streaming live to her 2 million followers while the charity gala's wealthy guests formed a curious circle around her. But what made everyone's blood run cold wasn't her aggressive stance or the expensive black belt around her waist, it was the way she pointed at the quiet black woman in a simple gray dress who stood near the kitchen entrance, holding a serving tray with trembling hands. "You think you can disrespect me in my own house?" Bianca's voice echoed through the ballroom, her words sharp and cruel. "You think just because you clean our toilets, you can talk back to me?" The crowd fell silent, some pulling out their phones to record while others shifted uncomfortably. Letty Washington, a woman in her early 30s with kind eyes and calloused hands, set down her tray slowly, her face showing no anger despite the humiliation burning in the room. The confrontation had started 20 minutes earlier when Letty had quietly suggested that Bianca shouldn't post videos of herself drinking at the charity event, since she was underage and it might hurt her father's political campaign. It was a gentle comment, spoken with respect and genuine concern. But Bianca had exploded, screaming about being corrected by the help in front of her friends. Now, with cameras rolling and her ego wounded, she was doubling down in the worst possible way. "I challenge you to a fight right here, right now," Bianca announced, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "Let's see if you're as tough with your fists as you are with your mouth." The crowd gasped, some whispering about how inappropriate this was, but no one stepped forward to stop it. These were people who lived for drama, especially when it didn't involve them directly. Letty's supervisor, Mrs. Chin, tried to intervene. "Miss Monroe, perhaps we should," but Bianca cut her off with a wave of her hand. "Stay out of this. This is between me and her." She turned back to Letty, her eyes blazing with entitled fury. "What's wrong? Scared? I have a black belt in 3 different martial arts. I've been training since I was 5 years old. You probably never threw a punch in your life." The live stream comments were exploding with reactions. Some viewers were cheering Bianca on, excited by the drama. Others were calling it disgusting, a rich girl bullying a working woman. But the numbers kept climbing: 50,000 viewers, then 75,000, then 100,000. This was exactly the kind of viral content Bianca lived for, the controversy that would keep her name trending for weeks. Letty stood there quietly, her hands at her sides, not responding to the taunts. She had worked for the Monroe family for 3 years, cleaning their massive estate, serving at their parties, and staying invisible just like she was supposed to. She needed this job desperately. Her younger brother's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves, and work was hard to find with her limited education and lack of connections. "Come on," Bianca shouted, bouncing on her toes like a boxer warming up. "Don't tell me you're going to back down now. Not after you had the nerve to tell me what to do." She gestured to the crowd of wealthy socialites, politicians, and business leaders. "All these people heard you disrespect me. Now they're going to see what happens when you cross a Monroe." The charity gala had been meant to raise money for underprivileged youth, but now it felt more like a Roman Colosseum, with the rich and powerful waiting to see blood. Bianca's father, Senator Monroe, was conspicuously absent, probably making deals in another room, unaware that his daughter was about to destroy his reputation live on social media. Letty finally spoke, her voice soft but clear. "Miss Monroe, you're upset. Maybe we should talk about this privately." Her words were respectful, without a hint of the anger she had every right to feel. But this only seemed to make Bianca more furious. "Privately? Oh no, this is going to be very public. My followers deserve to see this." She held up her phone, showing the stream viewer count that had now topped 150,000. "Look at this. This is already my biggest stream ever. You're about to make me famous in a whole new way." The crowd began to murmur, some expressing discomfort with the situation but still not leaving. It was like watching a car crash, horrible but impossible to look away from. A few guests tried to get closer, forming a loose circle that looked more like a fighting ring than a charity event. "Last chance," Bianca called out, her voice dripping with false confidence. "Either you accept my challenge, or you can pack your things and get out of our house tonight. Your choice." It wasn't really a choice at all, and everyone in the room knew it. Letty could lose her job for fighting her employer's daughter, but she would definitely lose it for backing down and looking weak in front of all these people. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. The only sounds were the quiet buzz of conversation from other parts of the mansion and the soft classical music still playing from hidden speakers. Then, slowly, Letty reached behind her back and untied her serving apron. She folded it carefully and set it on a nearby chair, her movements precise and deliberate. "If that's what you want, Miss Monroe," she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly through the now silent ballroom. "I accept your challenge." The crowd erupted in excited whispers and the sound of phones being raised to record. Bianca's eyes lit up with triumph, already imagining the viral clips and the media attention this would generate. She had no doubt this would be over in seconds, a quick takedown, maybe a submission hold, definitely something that would look impressive on camera. But as Letty stepped forward into the makeshift ring, something in her posture changed. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but a few people in the crowd noticed it. The way she held her shoulders, the lightness in her step, the calm focus in her eyes, it suggested this wasn't going to be the one-sided beating Bianca expected. The phones were recording, the stream was climbing toward 200,000 viewers, and the most powerful people in the city were watching with bated breath. What none of them knew, what Bianca couldn't possibly have imagined, was that the quiet woman in the gray dress had been holding back a secret that would change everything. As the two women faced each other in the center of the marble floor, with crystal chandeliers casting bright light on what was about to unfold, the real fight was just beginning. And it would reveal truths that no one in that room was prepared for. The ballroom buzzed with electric anticipation as Bianca Monroe strutted around the makeshift fighting area, her designer martial arts uniform catching the light from every angle. She had changed into her custom-made GI white with gold trim and her initials embroidered in silk thread, while Letty had simply removed her apron and stood in her simple gray dress and comfortable flats. The contrast was stark and intentional, designed to emphasize the gulf between the privileged heiress and the working woman. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bianca announced to both the live audience and her phone camera, "you're about to witness something special. This is what happens when someone forgets their place in this house." She gestured grandly to the crowd, which had grown as word spread throughout the mansion. At least 50 people now surrounded them, creating a human ring in the center of the Monroe family's ballroom. The live stream had exploded to over 300,000 viewers, with comments flooding in faster than anyone could read them. Bianca's regular followers were excited to see their favorite rich girl influencer in action, while new viewers had joined after the clip started going viral on other platforms. The hashtag Monroe fight was already trending in 3 cities. Mrs. Rodriguez, the head housekeeper, tried one more time to intervene. "Miss Bianca, your father wouldn't approve of this." "Perhaps," but Bianca cut her off with a dismissive laugh. "My father isn't here, and when he sees how many views this gets, he'll thank me for the publicity." Besides, she accepted the challenge. "This is all perfectly legal." Technical staff from the gala's media team had somehow materialized with professional cameras, turning the impromptu fight into a full production. The charity organizers were horrified but couldn't stop what was happening without causing an even bigger scene. Some guests were placing bets, treating the whole thing like entertainment at an exclusive club. Bianca began showing off for the cameras, executing perfect kicks and punches in slow motion, her movements crisp and practiced. 8 years of karate, 4 years of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, 2 years of kickboxing, she narrated for her stream. "I've competed in over 30 tournaments and won medals in 15 of them. I train 6 hours a day with the best instructors money can buy." The crowd murmured appreciatively at her display of skill. Her techniques were genuinely impressive, fluid, powerful, and precise. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a real fight, someone who viewed physical conflict as just another way to assert dominance over people she considered beneath her. "And what about you?" Bianca called out to Letty, who stood quietly at the edge of the circle. "What's your fighting experience? Self-defense classes at the community center? YouTube videos?" The crowd laughed, some more nervously than others. Even those who disapproved of the situation had to admit that Bianca looked like a serious martial artist, while Letty looked like exactly what she was, a working woman who cleaned houses for a living. Letty didn't respond to the taunts. Instead, she bent down and quietly removed her flats, setting them neatly beside her folded apron. She stood barefoot on the cold marble floor, her simple gray dress the only thing she wore into what was shaping up to be a very public humiliation. "Look at this," Bianca said to her phone camera, zooming in on Letty's bare feet. "She's not even wearing proper shoes. This is going to be over in 30 seconds, maybe less." The stream comments were brutal, with viewers making jokes about the obvious mismatch and predicting how quickly Bianca would win. But a few people in the crowd had noticed something others missed. Dr. Patricia Kim, a sports medicine physician who attended these galas regularly, found herself studying Letty's posture with professional interest. There was something about the way the woman carried herself now, a subtle shift in her center of gravity that suggested hidden athleticism. "The rules are simple," Bianca announced. turning in a slow circle to address both the live audience and the cameras. "This is going to be full contact, no holds barred. We fight until someone submits or can't continue. Winner takes all dignity, respect, and whatever's left of her job." She laughed at her own joke, but it came out harsher than she probably intended. The crowd formed a tighter circle, with people pulling out their phones to record from multiple angles. Social media notifications were pinging constantly as the footage spread across platforms. Local news stations were already sending reporters, having picked up on the viral hashtag and the prominent family name involved. Letty finally stepped into the center of the circle, her bare feet silent on the marble floor. She stood across from Bianca, about 10 feet away, and for the first time that evening she spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Miss Monroe, are you sure this is what you want? Once we start, I can't promise you won't get hurt." The crowd erupted in laughter and jeers. Someone shouted, "Is she threatening you, Bianca?" Another voice called out, "The maid thinks she's tough." But Bianca just smiled, interpreting Letty's words as desperate bravado from someone who knew she was about to be destroyed. "Oh, I'm very sure," Bianca replied, bouncing lightly on her toes and shadow boxing for the cameras. "The only person who's going to get hurt here is you. And then you're going to apologize to me in front of all these people and my followers before you pack your things and leave our house forever." The atmosphere in the ballroom was electric with anticipation and uncomfortable energy. This wasn't just a fight, it was a public execution, a powerful family's daughter putting a servant in her place while the whole world watched. The symbolism was ugly and obvious, but no one seemed willing or able to stop it. Bianca's phone was propped up on a nearby chair, the live stream showing both women in frame as the viewer count climbed past 400,000. Comments were flooding in from around the world as the clip spread to international audiences, many of them expressing shock at what they were witnessing. "Okay, everyone ready?" Bianca called out, raising her fists in a professional fighting stance. "This is at the moment my housekeeper learns some respect." She looked directly into her phone camera. "Don't forget to like and subscribe and share this stream with everyone you know. You're about to see something unforgettable." Letty stood quietly, her hands still at her sides, showing no sign of fear or aggression. To most observers, she looked like a lamb being led to slaughter, a working woman who had bitten off more than she could chew and was about to pay the price in the most public way possible. But as the two women faced each other in the bright lights of the crystal chandeliers, with hundreds of thousands of people watching online and dozens more surrounding them in person, something was about to happen that no one in that room could have predicted. The quiet maid who cleaned toilets and served drinks was about to reveal a secret that would turn this entire spectacle upside down. The fight was about to begin, and with it, the most shocking revelation of the night. The ballroom fell into an almost sacred silence as Bianca Monroe raised her fists and began moving in a slow circle around Letty. Her footwork was textbook perfect, light, balanced, and ready to spring into action at any moment. She had trained for this kind of moment her entire life, and every movement radiated confidence and technical skill. "Here we go," she whispered to her live stream, her voice barely audible but picked up by the sensitive microphone on her phone. "Time to show everyone what happens when you disrespect the Monroe family." The viewer count had now exploded past 500,000, with news outlets starting to pick up the story and share clips across their own social media accounts. Letty remained perfectly still in the center of the circle, her bare feet planted firmly on the marble floor. She didn't raise her hands, didn't shift into any recognizable fighting stance, didn't even seem to be tracking Bianca's movement around her. To everyone watching, she looked like someone who had never been in a fight in her life and was frozen with fear. "Come on," Bianca taunted, throwing a few test jabs in the air between them. "At least try to defend yourself. This isn't going to be fun if you just stand there like a statue." The crowd laughed, some people calling out encouragement to Bianca while others remained uncomfortably silent. Dr. Kim found herself leaning forward, something nagging at her about Letty's posture. The woman looked relaxed, almost meditative, but there was a quality to her stillness that reminded the doctor of professional athletes. She had worked with a kind of coiled readiness that was hard to see unless you knew what to look for. Bianca decided to make the first real move. She stepped forward with a lightning-fast combination, a jab to test Letty's reactions, followed immediately by a hook aimed at her ribs. It was a textbook opening sequence, executed with the speed and precision of someone who had practiced it thousands of times. But something impossible happened. Letty moved. Not away, not backward, not in the panicked flailing that everyone expected. She shifted exactly 3 inches to the left and turned her torso just slightly, causing Bianca's jab to whistle harmlessly past her face. Then, as the hook came in toward her ribs, she took a single small step back and to the side, letting the punch pass through empty air where her body had been a split second before. The crowd gasped. It had happened so quickly and looked so effortless that many people weren't even sure what they had seen. Bianca's combination, which should have landed cleanly on an untrained opponent, had hit nothing but air. "Lucky," Bianca muttered, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her voice that hadn't been there before. She reset her stance and tried again, this time with a more complex sequence. A feint to the face, a low kick to the legs, followed by an overhand right that she put real power behind. Letty's response was even more unsettling than before. She seemed to barely move at all, a tiny shift here, a minimal step there, but every single strike missed her by impossibly small margins. The feint passed an inch from her nose. The kick swept through empty space where her leg had been. The overhand right, thrown with enough force to knock out most people, met only air as Letty's head wasn't where it should have been. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Phone cameras captured every moment, but many of the people recording weren't entirely sure what they were recording. It looked like Bianca was fighting a ghost. Her techniques were perfect, her timing was precise, but she couldn't seem to touch her opponent. "What the hell?" someone in the crowd whispered, voicing what everyone was thinking. Bianca stepped back, breathing slightly harder than she should have been after such a brief exchange. Her confidence was beginning to crack as she realized that the easy victory she had expected was somehow slipping away. "Stop running away and fight me," she shouted, but even she could hear how hollow the words sounded. Letty hadn't been running. She had barely moved at all. Yet somehow she had made a trained martial artist look completely ineffective without throwing a single strike in return. Dr. Kim grabbed the arm of the man standing next to her, Thomas Chin, a former college wrestling coach. "Are you seeing this?" she whispered urgently. "Look at her footwork. Look at how she's reading the attacks." Coach Chin nodded slowly, his experienced eye picking up details that others missed. "She's not guessing," he murmured back. "She's seeing those punches coming before they're even thrown. That's not luck or accident, that's serious training." The live stream comments had shifted from mockery to confusion to genuine amazement. Viewers around the world were trying to figure out how a maid was making a black belt look like a beginner. Some martial arts experts in the chat were beginning to speculate about what they were witnessing. Bianca was getting frustrated now, throwing combinations with increasing desperation and decreasing technique. She had never faced an opponent she couldn't hit, and the psychological impact was devastating her game plan. Her movements became wider, her balance less perfect, her timing more predictable. And through it all, Letty continued to move with that same minimal, effortless precision. She never seemed hurried or stressed, never appeared to be working hard to avoid the attacks. It was as if she existed in a slightly different time frame, always one step ahead of whatever Bianca was planning. "This is impossible," Bianca panted, stopping her assault to catch her breath. "You have to be cheating somehow. Nobody moves like that." But even as she said it, she knew how ridiculous it sounded. How do you cheat at dodging punches? The crowd was starting to murmur more loudly now, people beginning to realize that what they were witnessing wasn't what anyone had expected. Some guests were pulling up martial arts videos on their phones, trying to find examples of the kind of movement they were seeing from Letty. "Maybe we should stop this," Mrs. Rodriguez suggested nervously, but her voice was drowned out by the growing excitement in the room. This was no longer a rich girl bullying a servant, this was something none of them had ever seen before. Bianca wiped sweat from her forehead and tried to reset mentally. She had been training in martial arts for over a decade. She had won tournaments, earned black belts, and never lost a real fight. There had to be an explanation for what was happening, and once she figured it out, she would adjust and win like she always did. But as she raised her fists again and saw Letty standing there with that infuriating calm, doubt crept into her mind for the first time. The woman across from her wasn't acting like someone who was afraid or outmatched. She was acting like someone who was holding back. The thought was so unsettling that Bianca almost didn't want to continue. But with 500,000 people watching online and dozens more in person, she couldn't back down now. Her reputation, her brand, her entire identity was built on being the tough rich girl who always won. She had to find a way to land a hit. She had to prove that this was all some kind of fluke. But deep down, a terrifying question was beginning to form. What if it wasn't? The marble floor felt cold against Letty's bare feet as she watched Bianca reset for another attack. The younger woman's breathing had become labored, and sweat was beginning to show through her expensive uniform despite the air conditioning in the ballroom. Letty, meanwhile, looked exactly as she had when the fight began, calm, centered, and seemingly untouched by the violence being directed at her. "Okay, enough games," Bianca announced to both her live audience and the cameras. The viewer count had now topped 600,000, with major news networks starting to broadcast segments about the viral fight. Time to end this joke. She bounced on her toes, shaking out her hands and trying to recapture the confidence that had been slowly draining away. This time Bianca came in with everything she had. A flying knee followed by a spinning heel kick, then a rapid-fire combination of punches that showcased years of expensive training. Her technique was flawless, her power genuine, and her speed impressive enough to draw appreciative murmurs from the martial arts enthusiasts in the crowd. But Letty's response was different this time. Instead of just avoiding the attacks, she moved forward. It was a single, fluid motion that seemed to defy physics. As Bianca's flying knee came toward her, Letty stepped into the attack rather than away from it, sliding past the strike with millimeters to spare. Her hand came up not to block, but to gently redirect Bianca's momentum, using the younger woman's own force to send her slightly off balance. The crowd gasped as Bianca stumbled, her perfect technique disrupted by what had seemed like the lightest possible touch. She recovered quickly, but the psychological impact was enormous. Letty hadn't just avoided her attacks, she had controlled them. "Did you see that?" Dr. Kim whispered to Coach Chin, her voice filled with professional awe. She didn't just redirect the force. She absorbed it, redirected it, and sent it back. "That's advanced internal martial arts theory." Coach Chin nodded grimly. "I've seen moves like that maybe 3 times in my career. And never from someone who wasn't a master-level practitioner." He paused, studying Letty's posture more carefully. "Who is this woman?" The question was beginning to ripple through the crowd. Phones were buzzing with text messages as people tried to research Letty Washington, looking for any clue about her background. But social media searches turned up nothing: no fighting videos, no tournament records, no martial arts affiliations. She seemed to be exactly what she appeared, a working woman who cleaned houses for a living. Bianca came in again, this time with a more measured approach. She had been training long enough to recognize that something was seriously wrong with her assumptions about this fight. Her opponent was displaying skills that shouldn't exist in someone with no formal training or competition experience. She threw a careful jab, watching intently for Letty's response. The older woman's movement was so subtle that the cameras barely caught it: a tiny adjustment of her shoulder, a slight shift in her stance. The punch passed harmlessly by, but this time Bianca saw exactly how it had been evaded. "You're trained," she said, her voice carrying a note of accusation. "You lied. You have martial arts experience." It wasn't a question, it was a desperate attempt to make sense of what was happening. Letty spoke for the first time since the fight had begun, her voice soft but clear enough for everyone to hear. "I told you that you might get hurt, Miss Monroe. I meant it." The simple statement sent a chill through the ballroom. It wasn't a threat or a boast, it was a fact, delivered with the kind of quiet certainty that made everyone listening suddenly reconsider what they were witnessing. But Bianca was too invested to back down now. Her pride, her reputation, and her entire public persona were on the line. She had built her brand around being the tough rich girl, the heiress who could handle herself in any situation. Admitting defeat to the family maid would destroy everything she had worked to create. She launched into her most advanced combination, a sequence she had learned from a former Olympic coach that involved multiple levels of attack, designed to overwhelm any opponent with its complexity and speed. It was a technique that had won her tournaments and impressed martial arts masters. Letty's response was so smooth and effortless that it looked like choreography. She moved like water, flowing around each strike with an economy of motion that was almost hypnotic to watch. But more than that, she began to counter. Not with wild swings or desperate grabs, but with precise, minimal contacts that disrupted Bianca's rhythm and balance. A light touch to the wrist that altered the path of a punch. A subtle shift that caused a kick to overextend. A gentle pressure that turned Bianca's own momentum against her. Each intervention was so small that it was barely visible, but the cumulative effect was devastating. Bianca found herself stumbling, off balance, and increasingly desperate. Her carefully practiced combinations were falling apart under these tiny, precise adjustments. It was like trying to fight someone who could see the future. Every attack was anticipated, every weakness exploited. The crowd was no longer just watching, they were studying. People were pulling up martial arts videos on their phones, trying to identify the style they were seeing. Comments on the live stream had shifted from mockery to genuine confusion to growing excitement as viewers realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. Internal martial arts, someone in the crowd whispered. She's using internal styles Tai Chi, Bagua, Sini. But at a level I've never seen outside of China. Impossible, another voice responded. Those arts take decades to master. She's a housekeeper. But the evidence was right in front of them. Letty wasn't just avoiding Bianca's attacks or getting lucky with her timing. She was demonstrating a level of martial arts mastery that most people only read about in books or saw in movies. Bianca was beginning to panic now. Nothing in her training had prepared her for an opponent like this. Every technique she tried was neutralized, every strategy countered, every source of confidence systematically undermined. She was fighting someone who made her years of expensive training look like amateur hour. "This isn't possible," she gasped, backing away to catch her breath. "You're just a maid. You clean toilets. You can't be this good." Letty stood quietly in the center of the circle, not even breathing hard despite the intensity of the exchanges. "Ability doesn't depend on your job, Miss Monroe," she said gently. "It depends on your dedication and your heart." The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. In front of 500,000 viewers and dozens of witnesses, Bianca was being taught a lesson that had nothing to do with martial arts and everything to do with humility, respect, and the danger of assumptions. But the fight wasn't over yet. And the biggest surprise was still to come. An elderly man in an expensive tuxedo had been quietly working his way through the crowd, his weathered face growing more animated with each exchange between the two women. Dr. Harold Tanaka was 73 years old, a retired martial arts master who had spent 40 years teaching traditional Chinese fighting arts before opening a small meditation center in the city. He hadn't planned to attend the charity gala, but his granddaughter had insisted he accompany her. Now he found himself pushing through the circle of onlookers, his eyes fixed on Letty with an intensity that made people step aside automatically. Coach Chin noticed the old man's approach and recognized him immediately. Dr. Tanaka's reputation in martial arts circles was legendary, though he had lived quietly since retiring from active teaching. "Dr. Tanaka," Coach Chin said respectfully, bowing slightly. "Do you see what I'm seeing?" The old master nodded slowly, never taking his eyes off Letty. "The white crane moves through flowing water," he murmured, quoting an ancient martial arts text. "Soft overcomes hard, yielding conquers aggressive." He paused, studying Letty's footwork as she continued to effortlessly evade Bianca's increasingly desperate attacks. "But this is not just textbook theory. This is mastery." Dr. Kim overheard the exchange and moved closer to the two men. "Master Tanaka, you recognize her style?" "Styles?" he corrected gently. "She is using at least 3 internal systems simultaneously: Tai Chi for the yielding and redirecting, Bagua for the footwork and circular movement, and something else." He trailed off, watching intently as Letty made another minimal adjustment that sent Bianca stumbling past her target. "Something else," Coach Chin prompted. "Sini," Dr. Tanaka whispered, his voice filled with reverence. "The mind-body unity art. But executed at a level I have not seen in 20 years. He was quiet for a moment, then added something that made both listeners lean in closer. "I have seen this before. Not the techniques, the presence. The complete integration of internal power with external expression." On the live stream, comments were beginning to shift as martial arts practitioners around the world weighed in on what they were seeing. Professional fighters, traditional masters, and Olympic coaches were all trying to identify and categorize Letty's movements. The consensus was growing that this was not amateur self-defense or community center training. This was world-class martial artistry being displayed by someone who wasn't supposed to possess it. Bianca made another desperate rush, throwing everything she had learned in over a decade of training. Her combination was technically perfect, incorporating elements from multiple martial arts disciplines and delivered with the kind of power and speed that had won her numerous tournaments. But Letty's response revealed something that made Dr. Tanaka gasp audibly. Instead of her previous minimal evasions, Letty moved with a sudden burst of fluid acceleration that seemed to bend the laws of physics. She spiraled around Bianca's attack pattern in a continuous flowing motion, her bare feet tracing complex geometric patterns on the marble floor. It was like watching water flow uphill, technically impossible but undeniably happening. "Bagua circle walking," Dr. Tanaka breathed, but integrated with silk reeling energy from Tai Chi and the straight-line power of Sini. "This is not self-taught. This is not casual training. This is decades of dedication under a master teacher." The crowd had fallen into hushed reverence as they realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. Even those who knew nothing about martial arts could see that Letty was operating on a completely different level from Bianca. Her movements had a quality that transcended technique. They possessed an artistic beauty that was mesmerizing to watch. Mrs. Rodriguez, the head housekeeper, found herself thinking back over the 3 years Letty had worked for the Monroe family. She remembered early mornings when she had arrived at work to find Letty already there, moving slowly through what she had assumed were stretching exercises in the garden. Now she realized those hadn't been stretches at all, they had been forms, solo practice routines from classical martial arts traditions. She's been training this whole time, Mrs. Rodriguez whispered to herself. Every morning before work, every evening after we left. She's been practicing. Dr. Tanaka was now studying Letty with the intensity of a scientist examining a rare specimen. As she continued to neutralize Bianca's attacks with seemingly impossible ease, he began to recognize specific techniques from martial arts lineages that were supposed to be closely guarded secrets. The 8 trigrams palm from Qing Tinghua's lineage, he murmured to himself. The silk-reeling energy of Qin family Tai Chi. The explosive power applications of Hebei Sini. Each technique he recognized was from a different traditional school, suggesting that Letty had somehow gained access to multiple master-level instructors, something that should have been impossible for a domestic worker. A memory surfaced in Dr. Tanaka's mind, something that had been nagging at him since the fight began. About 8 years ago, there had been a young woman who had dominated the traditional martial arts tournament circuit. She had been undefeated in internal arts competitions, winning national championships in both Tai Chi and Baguazhang. Her name had been Lita Washington, and she had possessed the same fluid, effortless movement quality he was seeing now. But that fighter had disappeared suddenly, withdrawing from all competitions and vanishing from the martial arts community entirely. There had been rumors about a family tragedy, financial problems, but no one had known the details. The martial arts world had lost track of one of its most promising young masters. Dr. Tanaka's eyes widened as the pieces fell into place. Lita Washington, he whispered, so quietly that only Coach Chen could hear him. The dragon of the internal arts. She was the youngest person ever to win the National Traditional Martial Arts Championship. Coach Chen's head snapped around. That's impossible. The dragon was a teenager, maybe 20 years old. And she disappeared years ago. Look at her, Dr. Tanaka said simply. Look at the techniques, the integration, the mastery. That young champion would be about 30 now. The same age as. They both turned to stare at Letty, who was continuing to make Bianca look like a complete beginner despite the younger woman's obvious skill and training. The math was starting to add up in their minds, creating a picture that was both incredible and heartbreaking. The crowd was growing restless as Bianca's frustration reached a boiling point. She had thrown everything in her arsenal at Letty and hadn't managed to land a single clean hit. Her expensive uniform was soaked with sweat, her breathing was labored, and her usually perfect technique was deteriorating under the psychological pressure of complete ineffectiveness. This isn't fair, she screamed, her voice echoing through the ballroom and clearly audible on the live stream, which had now reached over 800,000 viewers. You're cheating somehow. Nobody can fight like this. Letty stood calmly in the center of the circle, still not even breathing hard. Her gray dress was unwrinkled, her posture relaxed, and her expression remained one of patient sadness rather than triumph or aggression. I'm not cheating, Miss Monroe, she said gently. I'm just using what I learned a long time ago. Learned where? Bianca demanded. When? You're a maid. You clean our house. You don't have money for training or time for tournaments or access to master teachers. The question hung in the air, and for the first time since the fight began, Letty's composed expression flickered with something that might have been pain. Dr. Tanaka saw the look and felt his heart clench with understanding. He had seen that same expression on the faces of other fighters who had been forced to leave the martial arts world behind due to circumstances beyond their control. I learned when I was young, Letty said quietly. Before life changed and I had to find other ways to support my family. The simple statement carried more weight than any dramatic revelation could have. It spoke of sacrifice, of dreams deferred, of a master-level martial artist who had been forced to hide her abilities in order to survive in a world that didn't value her talents. Dr. Tanaka could no longer remain silent. He stepped forward, his aged voice carrying clearly through the now quiet ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his words stopping all conversation, you are witnessing something extraordinary. This woman is not just someone who learned a few self-defense moves. She is one of the most accomplished martial artists I have ever seen. The crowd turned to look at the elderly man, recognizing the authority in his voice even if they didn't know who he was. Bianca stopped her attack, breathing heavily and staring at Dr. Tanaka with confusion and growing dread. This is Lita Washington, Dr. Tanaka continued, using Letty's competition name with obvious respect. 8 years ago, she was the most dominant traditional martial artist in the country. She won every major tournament she entered, defeated opponents with decades more experience, and was being hailed as a once-in-a-generation talent. The livestream comments exploded as viewers began searching for information about Lita Washington. Within minutes, old tournament footage began circulating on social media, showing a younger Letty demolishing opponents with the same effortless technique they were seeing now. "That's impossible," Bianca whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. The evidence was standing right in front of her, in the form of a woman who had made her look like a complete amateur despite years of expensive training and natural athletic ability. Dr. Tanaka's revelation was spreading through the crowd like wildfire. People were pulling up old articles, tournament records, and video footage on their phones. The picture that emerged was of a martial arts prodigy who had burst onto the scene as a teenager, dominated every competition she entered, and then vanished without explanation at the height of her success. "Why?" someone in the crowd called out. "Why did you stop competing? Why are you working as a maid?" Letty's expression tightened, and for a moment it seemed like she might not answer. Then she looked around the circle of faces, wealthy, privileged people who had gathered to watch what they thought would be easy entertainment at the expense of someone they considered beneath them. "Because champions don't pay for medical bills," she said simply. "And scholarships don't cover everything when your family needs you to work instead of train." The words hit the crowd like a physical blow. Here was someone who could have been famous, wealthy, celebrated around the world for her incredible abilities. Instead, she had chosen to sacrifice her dreams and hide her talents in order to take care of the people she loved. The fight had revealed more than just Letty's martial arts mastery. It had exposed the ugly assumptions of everyone who had gathered to watch a rich girl humiliate a servant, and it had shown them what real strength looked like. But the night was far from over, and the most shocking revelations were still to come. The ballroom fell into stunned silence as Dr. Tanaka's words sank in. 800,000 viewers around the world were frantically searching for information about Lita Washington, and what they found was painting a picture that made Letty's current situation even more tragic. Tournament footage from 6 years ago showed a 19-year-old woman moving with the same fluid grace they were witnessing now, defeating opponents twice her age and size with techniques that looked almost supernatural. Letty stood in the center of the circle, her calm facade finally beginning to crack under the weight of having her past exposed to the world. She had worked so hard to remain invisible, to hide her abilities and live quietly in the shadows. Now hundreds of thousands of strangers were learning about dreams she had been forced to abandon. The 2019 National Traditional Martial Arts Championship, Dr. Tanaka continued, his voice filled with reverence and sadness. She was 19 years old and had been competing for less than 2 years. But she defeated Grand Master Lu Qin, who had been unbeaten for 15 years. The youngest champion in the tournament's history. Coach Chen was reading from his phone, his voice filled with amazement. She won 17 major tournaments in 3 years. Never lost a single match. There are articles calling her the greatest natural talent in traditional martial arts that anyone had ever seen. The crowd was hanging on every word, trying to reconcile the legendary fighter they were learning about with the quiet woman who had been serving drinks at their charity gala just an hour earlier. Bianca stood frozen, still breathing hard from her failed attacks, as she realized the magnitude of what she had stumbled into. "What happened?" Dr. Kim asked gently. "The articles stop in late 2019. You just disappeared from competition." Letty closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, there was a depth of pain that made several people in the crowd step back unconsciously. "My brother got sick," she said simply. "Leukemia. He was 16 and had his whole life ahead of him. The treatment was expensive, and my parents had already spent everything they had saved." The livestream comments had shifted from excitement about the martial arts display to something approaching reverence as viewers realized they were witnessing a real human story of sacrifice and loss. Professional fighters and martial arts masters around the world were sharing their own memories of Lita Washington, painting a picture of a young woman who had been destined for greatness. "The training camps, the travel to tournaments, the coaching fees," Letty continued, her voice steady but filled with old grief. "I could either keep competing or I could work to help pay for his medical bills. It wasn't really a choice." Mrs. Rodriguez found herself crying, remembering conversations she had had with Letty over the past 3 years. The younger woman had always been sending money home, always working extra shifts when they were available, always talking about her family with such love and dedication. Now she understood why. "Is your brother?" someone in the crowd asked gently. "He's alive," Letty said, and for the first time that evening she smiled genuinely. "He's 22 now, graduated from college last year, and working as a physical therapist. He wants to help other people recover from serious illnesses. The treatments worked, but they cost everything we had and more." The revelation hit the crowd like a physical force. Here was someone who had given up what could have been fame, fortune, and international recognition in order to save her brother's life. She had traded a championship belt for a maid's uniform, swapped martial arts glory for the quiet dignity of honest work. You could have gone back, Bianca said, her voice small and confused. After he recovered, you could have returned to competition. Letty shook her head sadly. I was gone for 4 years. In martial arts, that's an eternity. Younger fighters had taken my place, sponsors had moved on, and I was too old to start over. Besides, the bills didn't stop when the treatment ended. There was rehabilitation, follow-up care, living expenses while he couldn't work. Someone had to keep earning money. Dr. Tanaka was studying old tournament footage on his phone, comparing it to what he had just witnessed. Your technique has actually improved, he said with professional amazement. You've been training alone all these years, haven't you? Maintaining and even advancing your skills without any formal instruction or sparring partners. Early mornings before work, Letty confirmed. Late evenings after everyone went home. I couldn't afford to join a school or hire instructors, but I could still practice forms, work on internal energy development, maintain my conditioning. It was the only way to stay connected to something that had been such a huge part of my life. The crowd was beginning to understand the full scope of what they had witnessed. This hadn't been a rich girl bullying a servant, it had been a pampered amateur challenging one of the most accomplished martial artists in the country. Bianca's expensive training and tournament medals meant nothing compared to the level of mastery that Letty had achieved and maintained in secret. I remember you now, Dr. Tanaka said, his voice filled with emotion. I was a judge at the 2019 Nationals. Your final match against Grandmaster Liu, it was the most beautiful display of internal martial arts I had ever seen. You made a 70-year-old master look slow and clumsy, but you did it with such respect and grace that he embraced you afterward and said you were the future of traditional fighting. Letty's eyes filled with tears at the memory. He was a good man. He offered to sponsor my training, to help me prepare for international competition. He said I could represent the United States at the World Traditional Martial Arts Championship in China. She paused, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. That was the same week we got my brother's diagnosis. The story was spreading across social media faster than wildfire. News outlets were picking up the thread, sports reporters were calling contacts in the martial arts world, and documentarians were already reaching out to Letty's old coaches and training partners. The live stream had become more than viral entertainment, it had become a human interest story that was touching hearts around the world. But in the ballroom, Bianca was experiencing a different kind of revelation. She was beginning to understand that everything she thought she knew about strength, success, and worth had been completely wrong. The woman she had tried to humiliate had sacrificed more for her family than Bianca had ever sacrificed for anything. The servant she had dismissed as beneath her consideration was actually someone who operated on a level of excellence that Bianca couldn't even comprehend. I'm sorry, Bianca whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't know. I assumed. You assumed that your job defines your worth, Letty said gently. That your bank account determines your value. That someone who cleans houses can't possibly possess any skills or talents worth respecting. She stepped closer to Bianca, her expression compassionate rather than accusatory. Those assumptions hurt both of us, Miss Monroe. They made you cruel and they made me invisible. The fight had transformed into something none of them had expected, a lesson in humility, respect, and the danger of judging people based on their circumstances rather than their character. But the evening wasn't over yet, and the final revelations would prove to be the most surprising of all. The atmosphere in the ballroom had completely transformed. What had started as a cruel spectacle had become something approaching a sacred moment, with nearly 1 million viewers worldwide witnessing not just a martial arts demonstration, but a profound lesson about human dignity and hidden strength. Bianca stood in the center of the circle, her expensive fighting gear now feeling like a costume, her confidence completely shattered by the revelation of who she had chosen to challenge. Please, she said quietly, her voice carrying none of the arrogance that had started this confrontation. Show me. Show everyone what real skill looks like. Letty looked around the circle of faces, seeing a mixture of awe, respect, and curiosity where there had been mockery and cruel anticipation just minutes before. The livestream comments had become a flood of support and encouragement, with martial arts practitioners from around the world sharing stories of their own encounters with internal arts masters. Are you sure? Letty asked gently. I don't want to hurt you, Miss Monroe. What I've shown you so far has been purely defensive, avoiding your attacks, redirecting your energy. But true internal martial arts isn't just about defense. Dr. Tanaka stepped forward, his aged voice carrying the authority of decades in traditional fighting arts. With respect, Miss Washington, I believe everyone here would benefit from seeing authentic internal martial arts demonstrated properly. Most of these people have only seen external styles, the punching and kicking that dominates modern competitions. They don't understand what real internal power looks like. The elderly master's endorsement seemed to give Letty permission to reveal more of her abilities. She nodded slowly, then turned to address both the live audience and the cameras. Internal martial arts isn't about violence or domination, she explained, her teacher's instincts emerging. It's about understanding energy, both your own and your opponent's. It's about using minimum force to achieve maximum effect. She gestured for Bianca to approach. Try to grab my wrist, she instructed. Use both hands if you want. Hold on as tightly as you can. Bianca hesitated, then stepped forward and wrapped both hands around Letty's left wrist. Her grip was strong, the result of years of training and natural athleticism. She held on with enough force to leave marks on most people's skin. What happened next defied everything the crowd thought they understood about physics and human movement. Letty didn't pull away or twist free. Instead, she made a subtle internal adjustment, something that was barely visible from the outside but could be felt immediately by anyone in contact with her. Her wrist seemed to become liquid while simultaneously developing an irresistible force that made holding onto it impossible. Bianca found herself stumbling backward, her grip broken not by Letty pulling away, but by some kind of energy that had made her own hands release involuntarily. It was like trying to hold onto a flowing river or a bolt of lightning. The very attempt became self-defeating. That's called silk reeling energy, Dr. Tanaka explained to the amazed crowd. It's one of the most advanced concepts in Tai Chi Chuan. The practitioner generates spiral force from their center and expresses it through any part of their body. It takes decades to develop properly. But Letty wasn't finished with her demonstration. Now try to push me, she told Bianca. Put both hands on my shoulders and push as hard as you can. Bianca placed her palms against Letty's shoulders and pushed with all her strength. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Letty stood perfectly still, absorbing the force without moving backward. Then, with what looked like the gentlest possible movement, she shifted her weight and turned slightly. The result was spectacular. Bianca's own pushing force was redirected and amplified, sending her stumbling across the marble floor as if she had been struck by an invisible wave. She caught herself before falling, but the demonstration had clearly shown that her strength meant nothing against someone who truly understood leverage, timing, and energy redirection. Tai Chi principle, Letty explained to the fascinated crowd. Use 4 ounces to deflect 1,000 pounds. The harder someone pushes, the easier it becomes to redirect their force back at them. The live stream was exploding with comments from martial arts experts around the world. Professional fighters, traditional masters, and sports scientists were all trying to analyze and explain what they were seeing. But many admitted that the level of internal arts mastery being displayed was beyond their experience or understanding. Coach Chen was shaking his head in amazement. I've been around martial arts for 30 years, he said to Dr. Kim. I've seen Olympic champions, UFC fighters, masters from every style imaginable. But I've never seen anything like this. She's operating on a completely different level. It's not just the techniques, Dr. Kim replied, her medical training giving her a unique perspective. Look at her breathing, her muscle tension, her overall energy level. She's been demonstrating advanced martial arts for 20 minutes and she's not even slightly winded. Her heart rate probably hasn't changed from resting. The crowd was now completely absorbed in watching Letty demonstrate various principles of internal martial arts. She showed them how to generate power from the ground up, how to use the whole body as a connected unit, how to store and release energy like a coiled spring. Each technique was more impressive than the last, revealing layers of sophistication that most people had never imagined possible. This is why I stopped competing, Letty explained as she demonstrated a technique that made her seem to disappear and reappear in a different position. These arts aren't really about fighting, they're about understanding yourself and your relationship to the world around you. Competition reduces them to just another way to hurt people. Bianca was watching with the intensity of someone whose entire worldview was being reconstructed in real time. Everything she had believed about martial arts, about strength, about her own abilities, was being revealed as superficial compared to what she was witnessing. Could you teach me? She asked quietly, the question surprising everyone including herself. Not to fight but to understand. To learn what you know. The request hung in the air, representing a complete reversal of the power dynamic that had started the evening. The privileged heiress was asking the family maid to become her teacher, acknowledging that true mastery had nothing to do with wealth or social status. Letty studied Bianca's face carefully, looking for sincerity behind the request. What she saw there was a young woman who had just realized how much she didn't know, and who was humble enough to ask for help learning. That would depend, Letty said thoughtfully. These arts require more than just physical training. They require character development, humility, and a genuine desire to help others rather than dominate them. Are you prepared for that kind of commitment? The question would prove to be the beginning of the most surprising transformation of the entire evening. Bianca stared at Letty with a mixture of awe and crushing realization. The woman she had tried to humiliate was offering her something more valuable than all her expensive training combined, the chance to learn authentic mastery from someone who had achieved it through sacrifice and dedication rather than privilege and money. I want to try, Bianca said, her voice small but sincere. But first, I need to finish what I started. I challenged you to a fight and everyone is watching. I can't just walk away now, even though I know I can't win. Letty nodded with understanding. Honor is important, she agreed. But remember, there are different ways to lose a fight. Some defeats destroy you while others teach you and make you stronger. The crowd had swelled as word spread throughout the mansion. Over 1 million people were now watching the live stream, and major news networks were broadcasting segments about the viral confrontation. But the energy in the room had completely changed. Instead of bloodthirsty entertainment seekers, they had become witnesses to something profound and educational. One last exchange, Bianca announced to the cameras, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. I want everyone to see the difference between what I thought was mastery and what real skill looks like. She raised her fists and moved into her best fighting stance, drawing on every technique she had learned in over a decade of training. Her form was perfect, her balance ideal, her muscles coiled for explosive action. To most observers, she looked like a formidable martial artist preparing for combat. Letty simply stood there, her hands at her sides, completely relaxed and seemingly vulnerable. The contrast was stark, the trained fighter in expensive gear versus the maid in a simple gray dress, one tense and ready for war, the other calm and peaceful. Show me your best technique, Letty said gently. Everything you have all at once. Don't hold back. Bianca took a deep breath and launched into the most complex combination she knew. It was a sequence that combined elements from karate, kickboxing, and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, designed to overwhelm any opponent with its speed, power, and technical sophistication. She had never used it in a real fight before, saving it for emergencies or demonstrations. The attack was genuinely impressive, a blur of strikes that would have been difficult for most martial artists to follow, let alone counter. Bianca threw everything she had into it, using her youth, her conditioning, and her years of expensive training to create what should have been an unstoppable assault. But Letty's response was so elegant and effortless that it looked like a dance rather than a fight. She moved like water flowing around rocks, never resisting Bianca's force but never allowing it to touch her either. Each strike was evaded by the smallest possible margin, each kick avoided with minimal movement. But more than just defense, Letty began to demonstrate the offensive applications of internal martial arts. With touches so light they were barely visible, she began to disrupt Bianca's rhythm and balance. A fingertip pressed against a pressure point that temporarily numbed Bianca's arm. A gentle push at exactly the right moment that sent her stumbling. A twist that used her own momentum to tie her legs together. The crowd watched in fascination as Bianca's perfect technique gradually fell apart under these minimal interventions. Her punches began to miss by wider margins, her kicks lost their snap and precision, her footwork became awkward and uncoordinated. She's not fighting her, Dr. Tanaka observed in wonder. She's teaching her. Every touch is showing her a weakness in her technique, a flaw in her understanding. It was true. Letty wasn't trying to hurt or humiliate Bianca, she was giving her a lesson in the inadequacy of external force when confronted with true internal mastery. Each demonstration was gentle but clear, showing how years of expensive training could be neutralized by deeper understanding and superior skill. Bianca began to slow down, not from exhaustion but from the growing realization that nothing she did was working. Every technique she had mastered, every combination she had perfected, every strategy she had learned was being casually dismissed by someone who made it look effortless. Finally, she stopped attacking altogether and stood in the center of the circle, breathing hard and staring at Letty with complete bewilderment. I don't understand, she said quietly. How are you doing this? How can you make everything I know look useless? Because what you know is incomplete, Letty replied with compassion. You've learned the external forms, the punches, the kicks, the locks and throws. But you haven't learned the internal principles that make them effective. You're using muscle where you should use leverage, force where you should use timing, aggression where you should use intelligence. The lesson was being broadcast to over 1 million viewers, many of whom were martial artists themselves. Comments were flooding in from around the world as practitioners recognized the profound educational value of what they were witnessing. This wasn't just entertainment, it was a master class in traditional fighting arts being delivered by someone who had been forced to hide her abilities for years. Bianca's shoulders sagged as the full weight of her defeat settled in. She had challenged someone she considered beneath her and had been thoroughly outclassed in every possible way. But instead of the humiliation she had expected to inflict on Letty, she found herself feeling something she had never experienced before: genuine humility. "I surrender," she said quietly, her words carrying clearly through the silent ballroom. "Not because I'm tired or hurt, but because I finally understand how much I don't know." The admission was broadcast live to the world, showing a spoiled heiress accepting defeat with grace and acknowledging the superiority of someone she had tried to humiliate. It was a moment of character growth that surprised everyone who knew her, including herself. Letty stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on Bianca's shoulder. "Surrender isn't defeat," she said softly. "It's the beginning of real learning. You can't fill a cup that's already full, but an empty cup has infinite potential." The crowd burst into spontaneous applause, recognizing that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Not just a martial arts demonstration, but a moment of genuine human transformation. The livestream comments were overwhelmingly positive, with viewers from around the world expressing admiration for both women: Letty for her skill and grace, Bianca for her willingness to admit she was wrong. But the evening wasn't over yet. The most surprising development was still to come, and it would change both women's lives in ways they never could have imagined. The applause in the ballroom gradually faded as people began to realize that something significant was happening beyond just the end of the fight. Bianca stood in the center of the circle, her expensive fighting gear now seeming like a costume from a play she no longer wanted to perform in. The defeat had been complete, but instead of feeling destroyed, she felt strangely liberated. Dr. Tanaka stepped forward, his elderly frame moving with the careful dignity of someone who had spent a lifetime in martial arts. "Miss Washington," he said formally, using Letty's competition name with obvious respect, "what you have demonstrated tonight goes beyond simple technique. You have shown these people and the world what true martial artistry looks like." The live stream had now reached 1.2 million viewers, with major news networks beginning to broadcast segments about the viral fight. But more importantly, the martial arts community was mobilizing. Messages were pouring in from masters, former champions, and tournament organizers who remembered Lita Washington and were excited to learn she was still active. "There are people who want to talk to you," Dr. Tanaka continued, showing Letty his phone screen filled with notifications. "Master Lu Qin, who you defeated in 2019, has been trying to reach you for years. The World Traditional Martial Arts Federation wants to offer you a coaching position. 3 different documentarians want to tell your story." Letty shook her head slowly, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. "I appreciate the interest, but I have responsibilities. My job, my family's financial needs. I can't just abandon everything to return to a world I left behind." It was then that Bianca surprised everyone, including herself, with what she said next. "What if you didn't have to choose?" she asked quietly. "What if there was a way to honor your commitments and still share your gifts with the world?" The crowd turned to look at her, wondering what the defeated heiress could possibly offer that would matter in this conversation. Bianca took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to propose would change her life as much as Letty's. "I want to sponsor your return to martial arts," she announced, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Not just training and competition, but teaching. I want to fund a traditional martial arts school where you can share what you know with people who need it." The offer hung in the air like a physical presence. 1 million viewers held their breath, waiting to see how Letty would respond to such an unexpected proposition from the person who had tried to humiliate her just an hour earlier. "Miss Monroe," Letty said carefully, "that's a very generous offer, but—" "Let me finish," Bianca interrupted gently. "I've been thinking about this since you started showing me real martial arts. My family has more money than we know what to do with, and we spend most of it on pointless things. But this would matter. This would help people." She turned to address the crowd and the cameras, her voice carrying a conviction that surprised everyone who knew her as a spoiled social media influencer. "I've been researching while we talked. Do you know how many young people in this city have no access to quality martial arts instruction? How many kids from low-income families never get the chance to learn discipline, self-respect, and internal strength?" The question resonated with many in the crowd, particularly those who worked in education and social services. The idea of bringing authentic martial arts instruction to underserved communities was compelling, especially when it would be taught by someone of Letty's caliber. I'm proposing a full scholarship program, Bianca continued, her excitement growing as she developed the idea in real time. Free instruction for anyone who wants to learn, regardless of their ability to pay. Master Washington as the head instructor, with full funding for facilities, equipment, and additional teachers as the program grows. Dr. Tanaka's eyes lit up with possibility. A traditional martial arts academy focused on internal development rather than competition, he said thoughtfully. Teaching the classical arts that are disappearing in favor of modern sport fighting. This could preserve knowledge that might otherwise be lost. The livestream comments were exploding with support for the idea. Martial arts practitioners around the world were sharing the proposal, offering to volunteer or donate to support such a program. The spontaneous community response was unlike anything anyone had seen before. But Letty remained hesitant, her natural caution warring with the incredible opportunity being offered. Miss Monroe, this is a beautiful idea, but I need to understand your motivations. An hour ago you wanted to humiliate me on live television. What's changed? Bianca was quiet for a moment, considering how to explain a transformation that she didn't fully understand herself. You showed me what real strength looks like, she said finally. Not the kind that comes from money or privilege or even training, but the kind that comes from sacrifice and character. I want to learn that kind of strength and I want to help other people learn it too. She paused, looking around at the crowd of wealthy socialites who had gathered to watch what they thought would be cruel entertainment. My whole life I've been surrounded by people who mistake external things for internal worth. Tonight you showed me the difference. If I can use my family's resources to help you share that lesson with the world, then maybe some good can come from all this. The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable, and it seemed to reach Letty in a way that formal arguments or business proposals could not. Here was a young woman who had been genuinely changed by what she had experienced, offering not just money but a genuine partnership in something meaningful. There would be conditions, Letty said slowly, and everyone could hear that she was beginning to consider the proposal seriously. This wouldn't be about making money or building my reputation. It would be about serving the community and preserving traditional knowledge. Agreed, Bianca said immediately. This would be a non-profit organization with full transparency about how funds are used. You would have complete control over the curriculum and teaching methods. I would be your student, not your boss. The role reversal was complete and remarkable. The wealthy heiress was offering to become the servant student, to use her privilege in service of someone else's wisdom and skill. It represented a fundamental shift in how both women understood their relationship to each other and to the world around them. I need time to think, Letty said finally. This is a life-changing decision, and I need to discuss it with my family. Of course, Bianca replied. But while you're thinking, know that this offer comes with no strings attached. Whether you accept or not, whether you ever teach me anything or not, I want to do this. You've earned that right just by who you are and what you've sacrificed. The crowd began to disperse, but the conversation continued online as viewers shared clips and discussed the implications of what they had witnessed. The fight had become secondary to the human story of transformation, sacrifice, and unexpected redemption that had unfolded in front of them. As the ballroom slowly emptied, two women stood in the center of the marble floor, one who had found her voice and her purpose, and another who had discovered what true mastery really meant. The night had changed both of them in ways they were only beginning to understand. 3 months after the viral confrontation at the Monroe Charity Gala, the Washington Academy of Traditional Martial Arts held its grand opening in a converted warehouse in the heart of the city's most diverse neighborhood. The space was bright and airy, with traditional Chinese calligraphy on the walls and mirrors reflecting the late afternoon sunlight that streamed through large windows. Letty stood in the center of the main training floor, wearing a simple black uniform with Master Washington embroidered in gold thread, a gift from Dr. Tanaka, who had become both a mentor and the Academy's senior advisor. Around her, 30 students of various ages and backgrounds moved through the slow, meditative motions of Tai Chi, their movements synchronized in a way that would have been impossible just weeks earlier. The Academy had attracted students from every corner of the city. There was Miguel, a 16-year-old from the housing projects who had initially been skeptical of slow martial arts, but had found inner peace he never knew he was missing. Sarah, a 40-something nurse who came after her shifts to learn stress management through movement. James, a retired veteran dealing with PTSD who found that the meditative aspects of internal martial arts helped quiet the noise in his mind. And in the corner, moving with careful attention to every detail of Letty's instructions, was Bianca Monroe. The transformation in the young heiress was remarkable. Gone were the designer clothes and entitled attitude, replaced by simple training gear and a humility that surprised everyone who had known her before. She had kept her word about becoming Letty's student, showing up for every class, doing every exercise and accepting correction with gratitude rather than defensiveness. "Remember," Letty called out to the class, her voice carrying the natural authority of someone who had mastered both the physical and philosophical aspects of her art. "Internal martial arts isn't about fighting opponents. It's about fighting the limitations we place on ourselves. Every movement should teach you something about patience, persistence, and inner strength." The students continued their forms, some moving with the fluid precision of months of practice, others still struggling with the basic concepts but improving every day. The academy had become more than just a martial arts school. It had become a community center where people from different backgrounds came together to learn about themselves and each other. Dr. Tanaka sat in his customary chair along the wall, observing the class with the satisfaction of someone who had lived to see traditional knowledge passed on to a new generation. At 73, he had thought his teaching days were behind him, but the academy had given him a chance to mentor not just Letty, but all the students who came through the doors. "Master Washington," he called out during a break in the training, "would you demonstrate the application of the technique we learned yesterday? I think the new students would benefit from seeing it." Letty nodded and gestured for Bianca to join her in the center of the room. Over the past 3 months, the two women had developed a unique teaching partnership, with Bianca serving as both student and demonstration partner. The role reversal from their viral confrontation was complete. The former maid was now the respected master, while the former heiress was the eager pupil. "The principle we're working on today is called borrowing force," Letty explained to the gathered students. "Instead of meeting aggression with aggression, we learn to redirect hostile energy and use it for our own purposes." She nodded to Bianca, who stepped forward and threw a careful punch toward Letty's shoulder. The attack was controlled and safe, but it demonstrated real technique. Bianca's training at the academy had significantly improved her martial arts skills, even as it had taught her to use them with wisdom rather than anger. Letty's response was the same effortless redirection that had amazed the crowd at the charity gala, but now it was being used as education rather than demonstration. She absorbed Bianca's force, redirected it, and sent the younger woman gently past her target without any apparent effort. "See how she didn't resist my attack?" Letty asked the class. "She accepted the energy I was offering and then guided it where she wanted it to go. This is how we deal with conflict in life, not by fighting against it, but by understanding it and transforming it into something useful." The lesson resonated with students who were dealing with their own conflicts: poverty, discrimination, family problems, personal struggles. The academy had become a place where traditional martial arts wisdom was applied to modern life challenges, helping people find strength and peace in the midst of difficulty. After class, as students filtered out into the evening, Letty and Bianca sat together on a bench overlooking the training floor. The relationship between them had evolved far beyond teacher and student. They had become genuine friends, bonded by shared experience and mutual respect. "I got a call today," Bianca said quietly. "The documentary about your story is going to premiere at the International Film Festival next month. They want both of us to attend." Letty nodded thoughtfully. The past 3 months had brought more attention than she had ever wanted, but she had learned to use the platform responsibly, always directing focus toward the academy and the students rather than herself. "Are you ready for that kind of spotlight?" she asked, knowing that Bianca's transformation would be scrutinized by people who remembered her as the spoiled rich girl from the viral video. "I think so," Bianca replied. "My social media following has completely changed. Instead of people watching me for drama and luxury, they're interested in the academy, the students, and the traditional arts. It feels good to use whatever influence I have for something meaningful." It was true. Bianca's online presence had evolved from vapid entertainment to educational content, with millions of followers learning about martial arts philosophy, traditional culture, and community service through her posts. She had become an unexpected ambassador for values she was still learning herself. "My brother visited last week," Letty mentioned, smiling at the memory. "He wants to start a physical therapy program that incorporates some of the movement principles we teach here. He thinks the internal arts could help his patients develop better body awareness and emotional regulation." The success stories were multiplying. Students from the academy were taking what they learned and applying it in their own communities, spreading the influence of traditional wisdom far beyond the converted warehouse where it was taught. "Master Washington," Dr. Tanaka called from across the room, where he was reviewing applications from prospective students. "We have a waiting list of over 200 people. I think it's time to discuss expanding to a second location." The growth had been organic and overwhelming. Word of mouth from satisfied students, combined with ongoing media attention, had created demand that far exceeded their current capacity. But expansion meant making decisions about maintaining quality while increasing access, a challenge that required careful consideration. "What do you think?" Letty asked Bianca. "Ready to help build another school?" "More than ready," Bianca replied with enthusiasm. "But this time, I want to focus on young people, teenagers who are dealing with the same kind of anger and entitlement issues I had. Kids who need to learn what real strength looks like before they hurt themselves or others." The proposal made sense. Bianca's personal experience with transformation gave her unique credibility with young people who might dismiss traditional teaching from adults they didn't respect. Her journey from privileged bully to dedicated student provided a powerful example of change being possible at any age. As the evening light faded and the academy prepared to close for the day, the two women sat in comfortable silence, reflecting on how much their lives had changed since that confrontational night at the charity gala. What had started as an ugly display of privilege and prejudice had become the foundation for something beautiful and meaningful. "Do you ever regret it?" Bianca asked suddenly. "Giving up your anonymity, having your story broadcast to the world?" Letty considered the question carefully. The past 3 months had been intense, with opportunities and challenges she never could have imagined. Her quiet life as a domestic worker was gone forever, replaced by the responsibilities and rewards of being a public figure and respected teacher. "No," she said finally. "I spent years hiding who I was and what I could do because I thought it was necessary for survival. But hiding doesn't serve anyone, not me, not my students, not the community that needs these teachings. Sometimes the thing we think is protecting us is actually limiting us." The wisdom in her words reflected the journey both women had taken. Letty had discovered that her greatest strength came not from hiding her abilities, but from sharing them generously with others. Bianca had learned that her greatest power came not from money or status, but from using her privilege to serve something larger than herself. As they locked up the academy and prepared to head home, both women knew that their story was far from over. The school was growing, the students were thriving, and the community was embracing traditional martial arts in ways that exceeded their most optimistic expectations. The viral video that had started it all was still being shared and discussed around the world, but its meaning had evolved. Instead of being remembered as a rich girl bullying a servant, it had become a story of transformation, redemption, and the power of unexpected teachers to change our understanding of strength and worth. 3 months ago they had been employer and employee, separated by class and circumstance. Now they were teacher and student, mentor and protege, and most importantly, friends united in service to something greater than themselves. The academy doors closed behind them, but the light remained on inside, ready to welcome the next day's students and the next chapter of their remarkable journey together. Dear readers, thank you for taking this journey with Letty and Bianca. Their story shows us that true strength often comes in quiet packages, and that the people we overlook might be the ones with the most to teach us. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever encountered someone whose quiet strength surprised you? What do you think was the most important lesson Bianca learned from Letty? And do you believe people can truly change the way Bianca did, or was this transformation too dramatic to be realistic? Please share your experiences and thoughts in the comments below.